Hello friends, welcome to a new session of the chapter respiration. So in my previous video tutorial we have discussed about the respiration and exchange of gases, how the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide plays important role in their diffusion from higher partial pressure or higher concentration to lower partial pressure or lower concentration. How the oxygen from the alveoli diffuses into the blood and the blood carries the oxygen to the heart and heart pumps it to each and every cell where the oxygen is utilized for the oxidation of food and we get energy out of that, out of the food, and there carbon dioxide is liberated as a byproduct, and that carbon dioxide again diffuses from its higher partial pressure, that is from the cells, to its lower partial pressure, that is to the blood. And then the blood carries the carbon dioxide being deoxygenated, it comes to the heart and pumped back to the lungs again to get purified by giving it carbon dioxide and receiving fresh air from the alveoli of lungs. Okay, so this is all the process we have discussed in the previous video tutorial, that is the exchange of gases. So today in this video tutorial we will discuss how the oxygen and carbon dioxide transportation takes place in the blood. So in this particular video tutorial, till the end of this video, we will learn how oxygen transportation takes place in the blood, how the different components of blood carry oxygen to different parts. So let's discuss the transport of gases. The transport of gases. So transport of gases means the transport of the gases. Here the gases are carbon dioxide and oxygen. Okay, so these are the two important gases and they transport from one place to another in the blood. So how blood is responsible for carrying the oxygen we will discuss in this class. So we will discuss about the transportation of oxygen in blood or by blood, oxygen by blood. So how blood helps in taking oxygen to the body cells with the help of the blood, how oxygen dissolve into the blood to the plasma, to the RBC, how they play important role in taking oxygen to the body cells. So the respiratory pigment hemoglobin is present in our blood, which also plays important role, the hemoglobin. So the hemoglobin are present in the blood in the RBC. RBC means our red blood corpuscles or red blood cells. Okay, so they play important role in the transportation of respiratory gases. This hemoglobin plays important role in transportation of gases, means both oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, so hemoglobin has a very vital, very important role. So how transportation of oxygen occurs with the help of blood? Let's continue. So the oxygen does not dissolve in water easily. Oxygen transported from the lung, it is transported from the lung, alveoli of the lung particularly, to body tissue by blood. So from the lung or the alveoli of lung alveoli, the oxygen comes in contact with the blood, and it is taken out through the heart to the body cells. Okay, so this is how the blood takes oxygen from the lungs, comes to the heart, and the heart pumps the oxygenated blood to the body cells where it is utilized. So this is the path through which the oxygen travels with blood. So how it travels this path? Okay, so depending upon the partial pressure of oxygen, the transportation occurs by blood in two ways. So this process depends on the partial pressure of what? Of oxygen. Partial pressure of oxygen, and it also depends upon many other factors, but we will discuss them. But the most important one here is the partial pressure of oxygen. Okay, so transportation of blood occurs in transportation of oxygen occurs in two different ways. So what are the two ways by which the transportation of the oxygen from the lung to the body cell occurs? Let's discuss. So the number one way is the blood dissolves with plasma. So the oxygen dissolves with the plasma of blood, and being dissolved with the plasma, it travels the distance from lung to body cells. So here we need to understand that only 2% of oxygen transportation occurs through this process. Only 2% of the total oxygen travels from the lung to body cells by diffusion into the plasma, and it's carried as a physical solution Okay, so this is one way among the two ways of transportation of oxygen. So first one is the oxygen dissolves with the plasma. The plasma carries the oxygen to different parts, and it is account for 2% of the oxygen transportation only. So the most important way is the hemoglobin. The hemoglobin takes the oxygen and it performs the transportation. So the second important way is the hemoglobin. So the second one is the combining with hemoglobin. So before discussing this in detail, we need to know what is hemoglobin. So the hemoglobin is a protein. Hemoglobin is a protein of which 5% is hem and 95% is globular protein, which is known as globin. So 5% is hem and 95% is globin. Okay, so it is a molecule which is made up of 4 polypeptide chains. It is made of 4 polypeptides, 2 alpha chains and 2 beta chains. So it is made up of 4 polypeptides. Polypeptide means it is the addition of more than one amino acids making a protein like structure. So how many chains are there? There are 4 different chains. What are they? 2 alpha chains and 2 beta chains. Okay, so heme is the respiratory carrier part, and each unit contains a central iron atom. Why it is called heme? It contains iron atom at the center, which is Fe++ or Fe2+. Okay, and it is this iron atom combines with oxygen. This iron atom present at the center of the hemoglobin or the heme part, which makes 5% of the hemoglobin, is responsible for combining with oxygen. It combines with the oxygen atom. So this iron atom combines with oxygen molecules. Okay, so one molecule of hemoglobin can carry one molecule of hemoglobin can carry how many oxygen molecules? Can carry 4 oxygen molecules. So 4 oxygen molecules can be carried with the help of a single hemoglobin, and which makes the hemoglobin, which convert the hemoglobin after the heme is attached or the iron is attached to 4 oxygen molecules. The hemoglobin is converted into oxyhemoglobin. When the hemoglobin gets saturated, it gets oxygen, it combines with the oxygen, it forms the oxyhemoglobin. Okay, the chemical formula of oxyhemoglobin is, remember, HbO2 4. HbO2 is the chemical formula of the oxyhemoglobin, where 4 oxygen molecules are combined with hemoglobin. Okay, a normal individual has 15 grams of hemoglobin. 15 grams hemoglobin in 100 ml blood. So we need to know this data. 15 grams of hemoglobin in 100 ml of blood. Formation of oxyhemoglobin occurs in the lung. So this oxyhemoglobin is formed in the lung, where the alveoli contains higher partial pressure of oxygen, which diffuses into the blood, and it diffuses and binds with the hemoglobin, where it makes the oxyhemoglobin. So the process of conversion of hemoglobin by binding to oxygen molecules to oxyhemoglobin occurs in the lungs at the alveoli. Oxygen binding with hemoglobin molecule can be described by the following steps. So what are the steps? First, we know Hb4 binds with oxygen, and it is always a reversible reaction. Hb4 plus O2 gives rise to Hb4O2. Again, when Hb4O2, it is not saturated, because a single hemoglobin can bind with how many oxygen molecules? 4. So when it is bound with a single oxygen molecule, it is not saturated. It is 25% saturated. When it again gets another oxygen molecules, again reversible reaction. I am telling it is reversible. Why? Once oxygen binds with hemoglobin, it can also remove itself from hemoglobin. It can be free again. Okay, so when it again binds to another oxygen molecule, it will be Hb4O2 2. Now the hemoglobin is 50% saturated because two oxygen molecules are now bound to the hemoglobin. Next, Hb4O2 plus O2, reversible, Hb4O2 3. Now it is 75% saturated. When it again gets another oxygen to bind with it, it becomes fully saturated, forming Hb4O2 4, which is the formula of oxyhemoglobin. So oxyhemoglobin is now completely saturated. Saturated means the capability of hemoglobin is to bind with maximum 4 oxygen molecules. When it is bound to 4 oxygen molecules, we will say that the hemoglobin is saturated. Now it cannot bind to more oxygen molecules. If oxygen molecules present, then also hemoglobin is unable to bind to it. It has the maximum capacity of binding to 4 different oxygen molecules, not more than that. When 2 oxygen binds, hemoglobin is called 50% saturated. So now let's see the relation between percentage of saturation and percentage of saturation of hemoglobin is can be illustrated with the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. So let's see what is oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. It is a sigmoid curve. Let's see. So it has two axes, x and y, and x. Okay, clear? In the x-axis, we have partial pressure of oxygen. We have partial pressure of oxygen in mmHg, its unit. And in the y-axis, we have percentage of oxygen saturation. We have percentage of oxygen saturation. Okay, percentage of oxygen saturation. So the curve this oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve will look like this. It is sigmoid. Sigmoid means S-shaped, roughly S-shaped, and it will look like this. Means when the partial pressure of oxygen will go on increase, the percentage of oxygen saturation will also go on increase. But at a certain point, it will remain constant, because although oxygen is having higher partial pressure, but it cannot bind to the hemoglobin. So in this side, if we are taking the hemoglobin, then although we increase the partial pressure of oxygen, it cannot get at a certain point, it cannot get fused to the hemoglobin, because the amount of hemoglobin is fixed. And when all the hemoglobins are with 4 oxygen molecules, at that time we will say that all the hemoglobins are saturated, and it's the time when if more oxygen molecules are available, then also the hemoglobin cannot bind to it. So it is the point at which, by increasing the partial pressure of oxygen, the saturation, as all the hemoglobin are saturated, now no oxygen can bind to the hemoglobin, and the graph will be like this. Okay, so when the partial pressure is about 50, partial pressure of oxygen is 50, it will reach here. Okay, because when 100, it will reach here. So the middle is the partial pressure 50. When the partial pressure is 50, it is at the middle. Okay, so this is the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. Oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. Okay, it is a sigmoid curve. Sigmoid. Clear? Okay. Now let's move on to the carbon monoxide. Remember, the carbon monoxide is highly efficient to bind with the hemoglobin. When carbon monoxide is present, it will bind fast to the hemoglobin. It will not allow oxygen to bind because carbon monoxide has 200 times greater efficiency to bind with the hemoglobin. So it binds with the hemoglobin as if it is oxygen, but it has much higher binding efficiency with the hemoglobin, which is around 200 times more efficient to bind with the hemoglobin. Okay, so now let's discuss the factors affecting the hemoglobin affinity for oxygen. What are the factors that affect this oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve and what are the impacts? One is very common that we know, it is the partial pressure. Except the partial pressure, there are also some factors that have certain influence on this oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. Let's discuss about that. So the first one is the pH. So how pH affects this dissociation curve? So when the pH decreases or the acidity increases, we will see pH decreases, means acidity will increase. During this condition, when pH decreases, what will happen? The affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen decreases. Affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen decreases. So as the pH decreases, the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen is also decreases. Okay, so oxygen dissociates more readily, and when the pH is less, Hb or hemoglobin is less saturated with oxygen because the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen will decreases. Okay, so this is known as Bohr effect. We call it as Bohr's effect. This is popularly known as Bohr's effect. The affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen decreases. The hemoglobin cannot get saturated when the pH is less. This is called Bohr's effect. Okay, so when the carbon dioxide concentration will go high, at that time also the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen decreases, comes down when carbon dioxide concentration is high. Okay, so when carbon dioxide concentration high, the affinity of Hb for oxygen decreases, means oxygen cannot bind to hemoglobin efficiently. Likewise, when pH decreases, it will also affect the binding of oxygen to hemoglobin. Okay, so these are the two important factors, the pH and the carbon dioxide. Away from the partial pressure, these two also play important role, and they have the effect on the saturation of hemoglobin and the binding of hemoglobin with oxygen. So let's see how this curve, the changes in this curve occur when the pH is less. When the pH is less, at that time, when the pH of blood is less, this will change its position to this. As the pH is less, the oxygen saturation will reduce. When the pH is more, it will go ahead of the normal blood pH. Okay. Likewise, when the carbon dioxide partial pressure is high, when the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high, it will come to this, and when the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is low, the oxygen binding efficiency will increase, will go high. Okay, so as pH decreases, when pH is less, at that time it will come down, and when carbon dioxide is high, it will come down. Likewise, when pH is high, it will come off, and when carbon dioxide partial pressure is less, it will come off. So this is the change in the curve, which we call the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. So these are the different factors, the important factors: partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, pH, temperature has also some effect on this curve. When the temperature is high, it will come down. So here we can also add temperature is high, it will come down. When the temperature is low, it will come up. Okay, so these are the different factors that affect this oxyhemoglobin curve, and these are the two ways. One is the plasma, another is the hemoglobin. Plasma is responsible for carrying less than 2% of the oxygen is carried by the plasma in diffused condition, and the hemoglobin is responsible for carrying more than 98% of the oxygen. So the two ways by which oxygen transportation occurs, one is the plasma, which is responsible for carrying only less than 2% of the total oxygen, and another one is the hemoglobin present in the RBC, which accounts for more than 98% of oxygen transportation. So this is all about the transportation of oxygen. In the next video session, we will discuss in detail about the different components of blood who helps in the transportation of carbon dioxide, and in the next video we will also compare the oxygen and carbon dioxide transportation with the help of blood. So this is all for this video session. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you have not subscribed this channel, please subscribe, and if you have any doubts, comment below. Thank you very much. Please subscribe.